Making a difference isn't easy. Making change is actually very hard. It takes character, doesn't it? It takes a lot of character to be able to stand up against the norm. Who we have here today is going to talk to you about character. And what better person than Senator John Thune to do that? Now, I have a long list of things that Senator Thune has done and his positions in Washington, but you know what? I think I'm going to explain it in maybe one special way for me anyway. And that was, I've done a lot of interviews with Senator Thune when I was with Kelly. And I guess the way I can describe Senator Thune is genuine, because after the cameras went off, and I don't know if Senator remembers this or not, we talked about family. We talked about the things that were important in our lives. We talked about our kids in soccer. And that tells me a lot about who Senator Thune was and is. So I'm going to stop talking, and I'm going to let Senator Thune come up here and talk a little bit about character. So if you would help me welcome Senator Thune.
That's all right, thanks. Well, thank you, Scott. It is great to see you again, and it's great to be back here in Groton and to see all these other schools represented here. I think I've been to every one of your schools. We were up in Langford Lion Country last year during the track season. Then up to Ipswich Tigers. Where are you at? Over there. Okay, we were there for your homecoming one year. And I think I want to say, of course, Redfield is a place where I spend quite a bit of time because my wife is from Dolan, South Dakota. And so we've been up your way. And then we were here in Groton a long time ago. We were just talking about this earlier. I was on my way to Aberdeen once, and we got stuck in the middle of a blizzard, and they closed Highway 12 west of here. And so we were basically in Groton, and we were down at one of your local establishments here, I think playing pool or something, and I was doing this radio interview with somebody, and I said, you know, when I was growing up in Murdo, whenever we had a blizzard, they would, nobody could go to school, but they would open up the city auditorium and we'd all go play basketball. So I get this call saying, hey, we're opening up the gym, you want to play some hoops? So we came down here and somebody loaned me some tennis shoes and we played basketball. That's how we spent the blizzard of 1998, which you all may not remember, but that was a memorable time for me here in Groton. But I do appreciate the chance to be here and to have an opportunity to visit with all of you and all the schools that are represented. I know that a lot of you are some of you probably some seniors here. How many are seniors? Okay, quite a few. Good. All right, we got some upcoming graduates this year headed down the road. But I grew up, as I said, in the town of Groton. Anybody ever been there? Okay, a few of you have. It's on. If you go out, and you probably don't go this way, but if you were going to western South Dakota and you went down to Interstate 90, you would go right past it. Myrtle is right on Interstate 90. And, of course, when I was growing up, my dad was in the school system. He taught, coached. He was the athletic director. He drove the bus. My mom was the school librarian, so there wasn't literally anywhere I could go in the school and not get away from my parents. But it was a great way to grow up. The one thing I appreciate about growing up in a small town and going to a small school is the chance you got to do, the opportunities you got to do, and things you got to do that you probably wouldn't in a much larger school. I mean, I got to play sports, participated in sports, played the band, sang. I played tuba, I had tuba players here. All right, a couple fellow tuba players. It's a small fraternity. But, you know, it was a real, growing up in a small town and going to a small school, you do get a lot of opportunities to participate in different activities. So I'm very grateful for that. And I appreciate so much our smaller communities in South Dakota and our schools, because I have in my heart a real deep affection for the people who make our schools and make our communities go. And I would just encourage you all not to forget the people who have invested in you. There are a lot of teachers, coaches, administrators that are represented here today who are making a difference in your life, preparing you for what comes ahead. And I'm very blessed to have had people who are willing to make that investment in my life along the way. What I'd like to do very briefly today, as Scott mentioned, is just share some thoughts with you a little bit about what you're going to be hearing over the next few years. If you're a senior, you're probably thinking about next year, college, tech school, work, whatever. And those of you who aren't seniors yet, pretty soon are going to be confronting some of those decisions. And you're going to hear a lot in the next few years about success. And how does somebody, how do you be successful? And a lot of people define that by how much money you make, how good your job is, how much power and fame you acquire, all the material possessions that you might have. And the longer I live, the more convinced I am that it's really not about any of those things. It's really about the difference that you make. And people, in my opinion, who make a difference, there are really sort of at least three ingredients, three attributes, if you will, to those types of people. Maybe more, but these are the three that I sort of observed since I was your age, and really successful, and people who really do make a profound difference in the world around them. And the first thing is a commitment to excellence. And when I say a commitment to excellence, I'm not talking about perfection, because a lot of, if you're a perfectionist, you're going to be very frustrated and disappointed in life, because nobody's perfect. Excellence has to do with making the most out of what you've been given, taking your God-given abilities and putting them in their highest and best use. So, not everybody is an athlete, not everybody is a musician, not everybody is a scholar. We all have different abilities that God has blessed us with. But if you're a person of excellence, it means doing the very best you can with what you've been given. Now, I learned some of those lessons early on in life. When I was in high school, or from the time, I should say actually before that, middle school, my lifelong aspiration was to play in a state basketball tournament. From the time I was a kid, I just played, worked hard. And, I got into high school, and we were, going through the high school years, finally got to my senior year in high school. And we were playing for the district championship against our rival, which was Lyman County. And we had split with them during the season, and they were pretty good that year. We were pretty good. We had won the conference. So we're playing for the district championship, and at the end of the first quarter of the game, we're behind by a point. At halftime, we're ahead by a point. At the end of the third quarter, we're behind by a point. And we get to 5 seconds left in the game, and we're behind by 1 point, and we have the ball. So our coach calls a timeout, and we huddle on the sideline. He diagrams the play. So we come out of the huddle, we inbound the ball. A couple of my teammates come down and set a screen for me about what would be the baseline there, and I came out, popped up, got the ball at the three-point line. We didn't have a three-point line, by the way, back then. But I fired off a shot to win the game and to take us on, hopefully, to the state tournament. Guess what? I missed it. And I was crushed, because not only was it something, as I said, that I had a personal dream and aspiration to play in the state basketball tournament, but I felt like I had let my teammates down. So I'm sitting in the locker room after the game, and I'm the last one there. Everybody else has gotten on the bus. And, my coach comes up to me, Coach Appleby, and taps me on the shoulder. He says, "John," he says, "it's time to get on the bus. By the way, track starts next week." He knew I hated track, but he sent a really important message, and that message was, "I know you played as hard as you could. I know you gave it everything that you had. Yes, we didn't win the game, but you know what? There's always another day. There's always another sport. There's always another opportunity." And I know sometimes you can get really preoccupied with the wins and the losses, and with the results and the outcomes. That's not nearly as important as the process of what you put into it. Are you taking those abilities you've been given, and in whatever area of life, and making the most of them, trying to make a difference? So commitment to excellence is something that I think defines people that are successful, the people that I think really make a difference in the world around them. And the second thing I would mention is people who are committed to a life of character. People who are committed to excellence also, I find, tend to be people who are really committed to character. You heard Scott talk a little bit about that earlier, but if you look up character in the dictionary, there are several, of course, definitions for it, but one is moral excellence or firmness. But you've probably heard it defined this way: it's what you do when nobody else is looking. It's the kind of person you are. And when I think about a person's character, it's character qualities. Are you honest? Are you straightforward? Do you play by the rules? Are you respectful of other people? Do you take responsibility for your own actions instead of trying to blame somebody else all the time? It's very easy for us, when something doesn't go our way, to say it's somebody else's fault. You see a lot of that in our country today. I see a lot of that in Washington, D.C. in politics. Somebody always somebody else's fault. Nobody wants to own up to their own responsibilities. But being a person of character means being somebody who, when push comes to shove, will do the right thing no matter what the consequences are. And if you're going to be a person of character, you're going to be somebody who sometimes may not do the popular thing. Because sometimes the popular thing isn't the right thing. And you're going to be confronted with a lot of decisions ahead of you in the years ahead. And people are going to want to get you to compromise and to do something you know you shouldn't do. And I hope that if you are a person of character, that you will have the willpower and the courage to say no. You know, I remember when my daughters were younger, I came home from work one day and I drove into the driveway and my oldest daughter ran out into the driveway to meet me. She said, Dad, guess what happened today at school? And I said, what? And she said, well, Francesca's really popular. And I'm like, so? And she said, well, you know, I want to be really popular too, Dad. She said, the boys all like her, she's funny, she's cute. And I said, you know what, Brittany, being popular in and of itself is fine and good. But if it comes at the expense of doing things that you know you shouldn't do, or not doing things that you know you should do, I'm a lot more concerned that you be a person of character than you be somebody who's popular. And I hope that as you get on in life, that you will be people of character. People who, when the hard times come, push comes to shove, are willing to do the right thing no matter what the consequences are. And I have an opportunity, you know, in my office to hire people from time to time. We've got offices here in Aberdeen, and offices in Sioux Falls and Rapid City and Washington, D.C. And when I hire people, you know, I look for people, I'm interested in people who are, you know, talented, smart, and have the skills that are necessary to kind of do the jobs that we have in my office. But more important than anything else, I want people of character. I want people that are going to do the right thing. That's what's really important in this life. And so, anyway, a commitment to excellence, a commitment to character, those are two things that I think really characterize people who are successful, people who make a difference. And the final thing I'll mention is this, and that is a commitment to service. Now, people characterize what I do as public service. I do this as a career, it's a kind of a profession. But that doesn't, you know, service isn't confined to public service. There are so many ways in which you can serve. No matter what you do in life, no matter what you choose as a career or a vocation, you can make a difference by serving other people. There was a book written several years ago by a guy named Rick Warren. It's called The Purpose-Driven Life. It sold more than 30 million copies. It's more than any book, I think, in the history of the planet, with the exception of the Bible. And the first sentence in that book is, it's not about you. It's not about you. And if you get up every morning and remember, whatever you're doing that day, that it's not about you, things go a lot more smoothly. Because we have a tendency, all of us do, it's kind of human nature, to think only about ourselves and what's important to us and what can I do to make myself happy. But people who really make a difference are people who wake up knowing that it's not about me. It's about the people around me. It's about making a difference in their lives. Serving my God, serving others, those are the types of things that really make a lasting difference. And there are lots of ways you can do that. You know, I mean, I think about even in day-to-day, at this time of the year, you might have an elderly person in your neighborhood that has a hard time clearing their sidewalk, getting the snow shoveled off, or in the summer months, maybe getting their lawn mowed, or maybe you've got a younger brother or sister or a friend that had a tough day at school, didn't do well on an exam or something like that. You can come up alongside them, pat them on the back, and say, hey, we're going to get through this together. But there are lots of ways that you can serve. But it's really important that you remember that it's not about you. And I try every day of my job to do that. I don't always do it all that well either. But I try when I approach my job to think about the fact that it's not about me. And I live in a world where everybody thinks it's about them. Politicians by nature, you know, are always trying to get more press, more headlines, thinking more ways to get more attention. And but that's not what it's about. We're elected to serve people. And I think that all of us are here. All of us get put here on this planet to make a difference. And the way to do that is to be able to serve those around you. So those are just kind of three thoughts I want to share with you today about what I think are characteristic of successful people, people who really make a difference in life. They have a commitment to excellence, a commitment to character, and a commitment to serving others. And with that, I'd be happy to shut up, to try and answer some questions from all of you. We're out of session this week, Congress is, so it gives me an opportunity to get across South Dakota, and one of the parts of the job I enjoy the most is interacting with young people. You are our future. You're our future leaders, and I hope there are some in this room today who maybe want to serve in public life like I do. We've got the mayor of Groton is up here today. We've got the school board member here today. Kelly is here. We've got people, all kinds of different opportunities. It might be a political office, it might be a civic or community organization that you could be involved with, or church. But I just hope that you all really look at opportunities to step up and be involved in leadership, because we've got an awful lot of talented people here in South Dakota. And one thing I've learned from traveling not only across the country but around the world is we have something pretty special here in our state. We are incredibly blessed, because we still live in a place where common sense matters. We've got a lot of people who I think possess high levels of common sense and good, strong work ethic, and the types of character qualities that I think are really relevant in the world today. So thanks for the chance of being with you today. I'll throw it open. I don't know how you want to handle this, Scott, but if anybody has questions, comments, accusations, whatever the case may be, I'd be happy to try and answer. Yes, sir. How come Congress never gets along? That's a really good question. I think that it's inherent in a democracy when you've got people coming with so many different points of view and perspectives and ideas about how to solve problems. You're going to have differences. And fortunately for us in our country, because of our matchless Constitution, our founders came up with a way for us to resolve our differences that didn't involve taking up arms. In a lot of countries around the world, and you can see it by just picking up the newspaper today and reading the newspaper, the way they try and resolve conflict is they pick up arms, they go to war. And we have a way of doing that here, of resolving our differences in a peaceful way, but sometimes it gets a little messy if you're watching. And I think anytime you've got a divided government, which we have today, where you've got Republicans controlling one house of Congress, Democrat controlling the other, Democrat president, you've got a divided government. And so there's going to be a certain amount of that exists. Now, having said that, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be able to work together for the common good. And I think that's oftentimes what gets lost, is focusing on the common good. What can we do to achieve things, to create accomplishments that are good for the people that we represent? And frankly, too often, personal agendas get in the way of that. Political agendas, personal agendas, and if we could just focus on remembering who we represent and why we're there, I think things would go a lot smoother. But having said that, there is inevitably going to be, in a democracy, a certain amount of conflict, because there are some profoundly different opinions. You represent South Dakota. You have a very different point of view than somebody who represents the East Coast or the West Coast. And so we can do a better job, and we should, but that's part of our democracy, is to have those differences of opinion. But it's a good question. Yes, ma'am. The question had to do with the legalization of marijuana in Colorado, and isn't that going against the federal law? Essentially, the Department of Justice, I think, has decided not to enforce the federal laws and allow the states to move forward, and both Washington and Colorado have now done that. I wouldn't be surprised if there are other states that try to do the same thing. And I guess my own view on that is, and I'm not, I don't live in Colorado, but I don't know what good comes out of that. I can't see where that is something that leads to any constructive outcome. I just think that, I don't know if you've been around people, or that it just seems like it lessens people's initiative. And of course, it is a gateway to other types of drugs. And I don't know how anything good comes from that. But I would like to see the laws enforced, and unfortunately, that doesn't appear to be the case today. Yes, ma'am. Well, I think the question was, can you tax it? And I think that honestly, one of the things that I believe is motivating some of these states is they see some potential revenue there, tax revenue. And I was in Colorado here a few weeks ago, and it was very strange to me driving down streets in Denver and seeing signs, if you're 21, buy marijuana here. You know, the advertising that. And I think that the states are probably looking at this as a potential source of revenue. But because it's a potential source of revenue, it doesn't make it right. And, you know, it may be ways in which local governments can raise money to do things, but there are a lot of other ways to raise money. And I would like to see them pursue some of those as opposed to going down that path. Yes? I wish I could reach down to you. I just can't come down that far. He doesn't come. What got me interested in politics? Well, you know, I didn't grow up around it. As I mentioned before, my parents were educators. But it was kind of a weird deal, actually. I was a freshman in high school in 1976. And we had this tournament in my hometown every year, Roberta, called the Jones County Invitational Basketball Tournament, and we were playing a basketball game on a Friday night, semifinal game. We were playing against Stanley County, and I was a freshman. I got into the game. I've been playing some varsity ball, so I get 6 attempts at the free throw line. I make 5 of them. Okay. Next day, I'm on Main Street in Murdo at one of the stores there on the main drag, and I'm buying something at the checkout counter. And this guy in the line behind me taps me on the shoulder, and he says, "I noticed you missed one last night." And I'm like, "Who is this smart aleck? You know, I made 5 out of 6. I'm a freshman. Come on, give me a break." And he introduced himself as Congressman Jim Abner, and he was one of our federal representatives in Washington at the time. Back at that time, we had 2. South Dakota now has 1. We had 2 congressional members, and he was the one from the Western District, which is where I'm from. And that was my first exposure to a political figure. I didn't have any interest in politics. We didn't talk about it around the kitchen table. But he kind of started to follow my sports career. I started to follow his political career. And when he got elected to the Senate in 1980, and I had got my graduate degree from the University of South Dakota in 1984, he offered me a job. And I went to Washington. My wife and I had just gotten married, and we went out there and spent 4.5 years, and that's really how I got interested. Working in it, being around it, but had it not been for that sort of chance meeting back in my freshman year in high school, I'm quite certain I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing today. Yes? If I was given a chance to run for president, would I? You know, I don't have that aspiration today. I looked at it a couple of years ago. People suggested, encouraged me to take a look at it, and I did. It is incredibly daunting in terms of the requirements to run for national office in this day and age. One of which is you have to raise enormous amounts of money to finance your campaign. I don't know if you guys followed the 2012 presidential campaign a couple of years ago, but both candidates, President Obama and Governor Romney, his opponent in that election, raised around $1 billion. And I don't know how you raise that kind of money. You know? I don't have personal wealth. I always tell people that I think I could raise the first $1 to $2 million in South Dakota for the next $998 million. That would get kind of hard. But there are some requirements to run for national office that I think really put some pretty formidable obstacles in front of people who come from small states. But you know, I did take a look at it. It's certainly not something. I like the day job I have now. I want to make a difference in the Senate. And I, you know, obviously like to see the Senate change in terms of the majority in November. That would be something that would be very encouraging to me in terms of things I would like to get done. But I don't think you ever rule anything out. You know, I mean, I just think doors open for you. Like I said before, I had no idea when I was growing up that I'd be doing this, or even for that matter, as I got older in life and was working. I never really probably. Until I ran for office the first time, thought that this is something I would want to do. So, but I think if you want to make a difference, don't be afraid to walk through doors as they open. And I'm not suggesting that I have any intention of doing that, but I just think that you You always want to be open to opportunities that come your way. I would encourage you, all you guys, to that. Sometimes you may be going down a certain path in life. You may say, I want to do this with my life, or I want to get this degree. And sometimes a door will open. Well, don't be afraid to kind of push it open and see what's behind it and see what opportunities are out there. Because that's certainly something that happened in my life, and I know there are many others who could share the same sort of experience with you. Yes? Do I think Social Security will still be around when you retire? Well, I certainly hope so, but if we don't make some reforms in it today, it won't be, because right now, a lot of those programs don't add up. They just don't work actuarially, because there are more and more people who are, for example, they call my generation the baby boomers. Well, there are a lot of baby boomers that are going to be retiring in the not-too-distant future and drawing some of those benefits, and fewer and fewer people paying in. When Social Security was created back in the 1930s, there were 16 people paying in for every one drawing out. And now there are 3 to 1, 3 paying in for every one drawn out. Pretty soon it's going to be 2 to 1. So at some point, we've got to figure out how to make this program sustainable. Not just that one, but Medicare and Medicaid, some others as well. And I think that when Social Security was created back in the 1930s, the life expectancy was 63.8 years. People didn't. I thought that was always interesting. You couldn't draw benefits until you're 65. And at that time, you only lived until you were 63 or 64. So it sounds like a government program. But people now live. The average life expectancy now for women is 78, for men it's 74, and that's only going to go up. So maybe there's a way that we raise retirement age gradually over time, so people your age, or probably it wouldn't affect people who are retired today or nearing retirement age, but younger people would perhaps have to work a little bit longer. But we have to do things like that to make it sustainable. Otherwise, it won't be there for you. In fact, young people today say are more likely to believe in UFOs than they are to believe that Social Security is going to be around for them when they retire. And that's why this current generation of leadership has to make the decisions and exercise the leadership that's necessary to keep those programs viable. And that's why I'm frustrated that there doesn't seem to be the courage of the leadership to do that. We need to do it. Yes? My opinion on raising minimum wage. That's going to be debated here in South Dakota. It's going to be a ballot issue this year. People in the state are going to get a chance to vote on it. South Dakota is proposing to raise it to $8.50. It's $7.25 now. And Washington is proposing a federal minimum wage increase to $10.10. And I will say this as somebody who worked for minimum wage, actually worked for below minimum wage. My first job in Murdo, I got $1 an hour, and the next year I got a raise to $1.50 an hour. And eventually I made minimum wage, which at that time was $3.35. But those jobs were important to people like me, because I needed income, I needed a job in the summer, I helped save money for college, and eventually when I made cook in the restaurant I worked in, I got $6 an hour. I was making big money. But it's important that there be jobs available for younger people, for people who are trying to get on that first rung of the economic ladder. And my concern about raising the minimum wage is it could very well cost us those types of jobs, because a lot of times employers, people who are trying to create the jobs for people, when the price of labor goes up, when you raise the cost of something, you usually get less of it. And that's kind of an economics lesson. But I want to see people on the lower income ladders improve their standing in life. I want to see people get good paying jobs that can help pay the bills and help them enter the middle class. And I am not convinced that raising the minimum wage accomplishes that. I think there are some things, policies that we could put in place that would accomplish that. And just by way of, sort of to add some perspective to that, the Congressional Budget Office, which is in Washington, which we use as sort of the official scorekeeper, came out with an analysis earlier this week that suggested that if the minimum wage were raised to $10.10 an hour, it could cost up to 1 million jobs. Now, they didn't say definitively it was going to cost us 1 million jobs, but they said it could cost 1 million jobs. So to me, I don't know why you would put policies in place if the best way to move up the economic ladder is to get a job. something that's going to cost you jobs. The other thing the study said is it would raise the cost of everything that we buy. So that also hurts people at the lower income levels. And my own view is, you want to help people get up that next rung on that ladder of success, on that economic ladder. And I think that raising the minimum wage has potential actually to hurt the poorest among us and the people who really do need the help and need the good paying jobs. I would rather see us put policies in place that help create jobs and create an opportunity for people to come up that income ladder. So, but like I said, people in South Dakota are going to have an opportunity to vote on that this November. And the truth is, I would rather see it decided there than in Washington, D.C. I think I would rather have the states making decisions about what's in the best interest of the people in their individual states and having the federal government tell them how to do it. So I prefer that model and that approach. If we're going to have that debate, I'd rather we have it. What do you think, by the way? I bet there's some people here who'd like to see anybody working for minimum wage? Few of you are, okay? Probably like to see it raised, wouldn't you? All right. Yes. Do I think that the work being done in Washington, D.C. is more about winning political arguments or more about helping people? I think everybody comes to Congress, everybody comes to their job, believing that the work that they're doing is helping the people that they represent. I think sometimes it deteriorates down into it does become a political argument. And like I said earlier, there are deep differences in the solutions that people think will help solve the challenges and problems we face in the country. And there are two very different, there are very different visions about how to provide a better future. And frankly, I think that, like I said earlier, I think that's somewhat inevitable. You're going to have political give and take. But at the end of the day, when all that's said and done, you ought to remember and focus on those people that you represent, that you're trying to help. That middle-class family that's trying to, save enough money to give their kids a college education, or just pay the mortgage, pay the rent, pay the car payment, maybe put aside something for retirement. Those are the people that you want to keep in mind, and remember when you're there that that's why. As I mentioned earlier, when you wake up and remember it's not about you, it makes that a lot easier. But I do find oftentimes that political agendas and winning and losing gets in the way of the common good. And politics and democracy inherently ought to be about the common good. It ought to be about making the world a better place and providing a better future. So it's certainly a factor. Political arguments, often winning and losing, sometimes gets in the way of that, but I guess you hope in the end that people's better angels will come through and we'll focus on the common good. Yes? What's that? What do I think of Common Core? Interesting. Well, it's not something that I'm real hands-on with. It's something that they're debating in the state legislature. And to be honest, I'm not convinced. I think that there was a reason why they came up with standards. And I think standards are good. I think goals are good. I think we want accountability in our schools today. I think those are all good things. I also think that you have to provide some level of flexibility, because not every school, not every student is the same. And we all learn at different rates. And it's hard sometimes to measure things in that way. No Child Left Behind, which kind of preceded the Common Core, was something that was passed in 2002. I was a member of the House of Representatives, and I voted for it at the time because I thought that trying to create high standards and create accountability was a good thing. But there were problems with its implementation. There were some things that needed to be refined and changed because, you would say, for example, a school here in South Dakota, there are certain areas of our state where they're just not going to be the same as certain other areas of our state. And that's why I've always maintained you've got to have some flexibility in these things. Set high standards, set goals, have accountability, but provide some flexibility. And I think that's the thing that, as I understand at least about the Common Core, a similar debate is occurring. The states have the flexibility that they need. And frankly, I guess I'm of the view that education generally is better when you've got parents, school boards, teachers, administrators, those folks involved in the decision-making process, rather than having it dictated out of Washington, D.C. So I'm a big advocate for keeping as much of the decision-making, and for that matter, as much of the resource, closer to the students, closer to the schools, and I think you get a better outcome that way. I don't know if that answers your question, but it's kind of my theories on education, and I think how Common Core sort of plays into that. Yes? Do I see yeah, I mean, the question is, do I see an increase for teachers in our state? And, you know, math and science, we're trying to encourage more teachers in some of those fields. I guess, and I say this as somebody that grew up in the house of an educator. My dad was a teacher, and I have great appreciation for what our teachers do. I do think that by and large, that's a discussion that happens here in South Dakota. The federal contribution to education is about a dime on the dollar. That's about the federal money that comes into education is about a dime on every dollar. And that's why I don't like Washington, D.C. dictating. But I do think if you're going to, you have to value the things that are important to you. And I don't think there's anything that's more important to a better future. I don't think there's anything that's really more important to ending, you know, or addressing the issue of income inequality in our country than education. A good education opens doors all over the place. And so I'm a big advocate of teachers and making sure that they're compensated in a way that values the contribution they made toward preparing and educating our kids for the future. And you know, what's the right number? I don't know. I'd like to see our teachers paid more. And I think that's there's no more important cause, really, than taking care of that next generation. So, but I understand that you've got to work within the constraints that are there budget-wise, and those are hard decisions. I know our school boards in our state grapple with that, and we need to make sure that you know, our legislature every year is debating how to do a better job of seeing that we provide the right incentives for people in state education and continue to teach, and especially in some of those fields where we need teachers. Yes, ma'am.
Besides Obamacare, what other ways do you think we should use to reform our healthcare system?
Besides Obamacare, what other ways do I think we should reform our healthcare system? Well, I would say besides, yeah, and I would take that aside. If we could repeal it, which I think would be a good thing. There are some things I think we could do, and immediately, which we ought to do, should have been done a long time ago. One is to allow people to buy insurance across state lines. You know, you can buy almost any product across state lines, but we don't have a competitive insurance market in this country. So why wouldn't you allow people, if you can get a better insurance policy someplace else, to create sort of a national market where there's competition? Because competition creates more choices, and competition also drives prices down. So that would be one thing. I would also say allowing people to buy in you know, larger groups, to form groups, because when you form larger groups, you generally get group discounts. You get, you know, the benefit of having a high volume. So that's something that today we don't allow people to join into groups for purchasing purposes. I would say that we ought to make sure that we're changing our legal system in a way that does away with a lot of the junk lawsuits that clog up our legal system and make it harder for doctors to practice medicine. I mean, too many doctors today practice what's called defensive medicine. So they're so worried about getting sued that they order multiple tests or duplicate tests, and a lot of money gets wasted on that. So it drives up the cost of health care. So those are a few things I can think of. I think on another level, you could change the tax treatment of people who buy their health insurance in the individual marketplace as opposed to those who get it through their employer. If you get your insurance through your employer, there's a tax benefit to you and your employer. If you buy it in the individual marketplace, you don't get that. And I think the one thing that you want to do in healthcare is create more competition and more choices, because when you have more competition and more choices for people, it drives and puts downward pressure on prices. And unfortunately, we don't have that today. We've got way too much, there's no constraint on utilization in healthcare. And I'm getting into a lot of the weeds on this, but to answer your question, more choices, more competition, I think that's the way to approach healthcare that will make it more affordable for more people in this country. Am I getting the hook here, Scott? All right, one more up here. I didn't get back to that back row.
What's your opinion on tattoos and piercings in the workplace? What's your opinion on tattoos and piercings in the workplace?
Tattoos and piercings in the workplace. That would be a matter of personal preference, I would think. That's a good question. I think every workplace is probably going to have some of their own standards about that, but, those types of issues, younger generation. I fought my daughters getting tattoos. Both of them have them. I think it's not something that I would encourage, but I guess everybody has a different view on that. But I think when it comes to the workplace, there are probably different employers going to have different sorts of standards. All right, well, thanks guys very much. Great being with you.